Welcome back to SM Sports Radio. We got another loaded show for you guys today. So much to talk about. Another pretty good week of sports across the board. We're going to talk a little MLB, go a little bit more in depth into that than we have in previous shows. We'll get into some college football. We'll recap the Stanley Cup Final. We'll get into some moves inside college baseball, including the results of the Men's College World Series and a coaching hire. And finally, we'll wrap it up with a little NBA talk.
Yes, and another coaching hire that happened in the NBA. But
we'll get to that later.
Yes, let's dive right into it with the MLB. And we're going to do something new this week. We've got our winner and loser of the week. Now, this can be a team or a player that we think either did amazing or maybe didn't do anything at all in case of the loser side of this. But let's start off with, who is your winner for this week?
My winner of the week is none other than the Atlanta Braves. The Braves... Since our last recording, the Braves swept the Tigers, which isn't all that to ride home about, but did tear up Tarek Skubal in Game 3 of that series.
I was really impressed by that. I thought that was going to be a loss for sure. I thought you guys would get the other two versus the Tigers easily, but to absolutely just... Skubal got shelled, which is not something that's happened all year. I think he raised his ERA by like 0.5 in one game. It was very impressive.
He bounced back in tonight's game, Tuesday, when we're recording this. He bounced back against the Phillies through, I think, 7 innings of shutout ball. But a really good series there to start the week for the Braves, holding the Tigers to only 2 runs in 3 games, and then have an off day Thursday, piggyback into the weekend at Yankee Stadium, take 2 of 3 from the Yankees, who have been the best team in the American League so far this season. Yeah, best team in baseball. I'd give you that. Took 2 out of 3 there, lost Charlie Morton's start on Saturday, which was kind of to be expected against Marcus Stroman, and then did lose the first game of the series against the Cardinals, but at 7-3 in their last 10, and I believe, 5-2 in their last 7, the Braves are my winner of the week.
Yeah, I definitely can't argue that. Braves have been great. It's been a good bounce back for them recently. For me, my winner of the week is a player, and it is the Pittsburgh Pirates left fielder Bryan Reynolds, who extended his league-leading hit streak to 21, and also is the longest of any player in the MLB at any point this season at 21. I don't know if he has a hit yet as of tonight as we were recording, but granted that the Pirates have 9 runs right now, I'd be willing to guess he does. So it would be at 22 if that's the case. His slash line for the past week is 429, 520, 905, which is absolutely absurd. Anytime you've got an OPS over or approaching 1,500, that's a pretty good week. So
that's like Jack Caglione the whole season.
Yeah, Jack Caglione the whole season. Not a Golden Spikes finalist. I'm never going to let it go. But Bryan Reynolds had a very good week for the Buccos. He did get to play the Reds twice, but granted, the Pirates didn't score in many of those games other than the one tonight. So it's been a very, very impressive run for Bryan Reynolds as of late. You just can't get the guy out. It seems like he's not striking out either. When he does get out, he's still getting the bat to the ball. He's incredibly hot right now. This is one of the best hitters in baseball, honestly, that goes under the radar because he plays in Pittsburgh. And this is a guy that you saw the Pirates actually see the value in a guy for once. They signed him to a massive extension this offseason, something the Pirates rarely do with any player. So they know what they have there in Pittsburgh, and he has been incredible. And over to the loser side, I'll start with the losers, and it's the Toronto Blue Jays. They are just completely lost right now. They're currently on a 7-game losing streak, which I don't know if you guys know how days of the week work, but that's pretty much the entire week, a 7-game losing streak. They have been just horrifically bad this season. The players that were supposed to be stars are not playing well. Bo Bichette has not been good all season.
Future Atlanta Brave.
Vlad Jr. has been very underwhelming. Some of these pitching signings that they made, like Kevin Gausman, Yusei Kikuchi, just have not really panned out incredibly well for them. They DFA'd Cavan Biggio, who is immediately hitting with the Dodgers, as players tend to do. And so just it feels like the sky's kind of falling in Rogers Center right now. The City Connect uniforms also weren't good. Just nothing can go right for the Blue Jays, and for those reasons, they are my loser of the week.
Yeah, I can't argue with that one. You definitely took the best loser of the week. We're going to stay within the American League, and I'm going to go with the Kansas City Royals, who are kind of my secondary team just because of my grandpa's affiliation with Kansas City sports. And the Royals had about as bad of a week as you can have for a team that is, I think it's fair to say they're contending this season.
Yeah.
For the playoffs. They lost 2 out of 3 to the Oakland A's, and then they got swept by the Rangers in Arlington. So that's not a great stretch for a team that's been pretty good all season. They got
Wyatt Langforded.
Yeah, they indeed did. And the offense just has been dreadful throughout this stretch. They scored 5, 1, and 3 against Oakland and scored 2, 0, and 0 against the Rangers.
You don't win a lot of games scoring 0 runs.
No.
That's your expert sports analysis tip for the day. If a baseball team scored 0 runs, they are unlikely to win the game.
Yes, scoreless teams are also winless this season. So.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, isn't it? But yeah, the Royals,
nice correlation
really
there.
Been lost. Yeah. It's been trouble for them, especially at a time where the Twins are playing so well and the Guardians just keep winning. Weirdly, this is not a division where you can take a week off this year as we might have expected it to be. So losing streaks like this, or maybe not streaks, but just bad stretches like the Royals are having right now, you really cannot get away with in the AL Central this season. And I know I mentioned him for 1 second, but I do want to give a shout-out to Wyatt Langford, who in the same week hit his first over-the-wall home run and his first grand slam in 2 separate games. The umpires are finally calling a fair strike zone for this guy, and he is raking immediately. I think there's a reason he made the opening day roster for these Texas Rangers, and a lot of people, even you, were like, oh, well, Evan Carter, young players at the Rangers, it's got to be Evan Carter, Rookie of the Year. Wyatt Langford has been much better than Evan Carter this season, and he's only really getting started, in my opinion. He's finally starting to get hot, and in a Rangers lineup that has been weirdly struggling this year, I think it's going to be a big boost for them. Yeah, for sure. And before we move on from MLB, something that we talked about earlier in the week that we didn't discuss in pre-show, it just came to my mind. Any players that come to the forefront of your mind when you think about players that could be moved to contender at the deadline? For me, I kind of alluded to it earlier. For me, it's Bo Bichette. Yeah, I think the destination for him is the Atlanta Braves. The Braves, as we know, are paying Orlando Arcia pretty much next to nothing to be the starting shortstop. He has been absolutely dreadful at the plate over his last 162 games, and his defense is getting worse every week. He left the game a couple nights, I think last night, Monday night, due to dizziness, so that's never a good sign. And I'm pretty sure Bo Bichette would be somewhat of a cheaper get for the Braves. Anthopoulos, obviously, with ties there. He was the general manager with Toronto before he was with Atlanta. And you wouldn't really have to do anything with Orlando Arcia because you're already paying him like a bench player. So you can be like, all right, Arcia, you're our fifth infielder. Like you're gonna be the upgraded version of Zach Short. What Zach Short has been doing for the Braves right now, starting for Arcia in his absence. In Tuesday's game that I just received word was moved to Wednesday. Yeah, split doubleheader. But Bo Bichette is the guy that is at the forefront of my mind. I don't know if that's just because I'm a Braves fan, but I think he definitely gets moved. Well, what is funny about this discussion is 3 or 4 weeks ago we had this discussion. I was like, oh, Bo Bichette, as a Braves fan, would you want Bo Bichette? And you're like, no, we have Orlando Arcia. And so to see that shift as Arcia struggling has been interesting to see. But a guy that I think is going to get moved is actually, spoiler alert, we'll talk about this in a couple of minutes, on my All-Star ballot, and that is Heliot Ramos of the San Francisco Giants. This is a guy that's kind of come out of nowhere. He's hitting over 300 on the year, has an OPS over 900, and for a Giants team that is in a big hole right now, the starting pitching has been oft injured this season. You've got almost nothing from Blake Snell. Jorge Soler, Matt Chapman have not been what you expected them to be. I think this is a team that decides to sell at the deadline, seeing as I think they're the 3rd worst team in the National League right now. Yeah, they are. 3rd worst team in the National League. And so I think that they definitely will be selling at the deadline. And who better to sell right now than Heliot Ramos? Yeah, I'm pretty sure he hit a home run in that Birmingham game. I think he did. I think he had a big home run there. Not quite the shot that Brendan Donovan had in that game, though. That was a nuke. That definitely was. And the Giants, I never was really high on them to start the season. This is kind of honestly I definitely did not pick them to win the division. This is kind of what I expected from the Giants, but yeah, with as few sellers as there are in the National League, especially this season, I think you got to take advantage of that if you're San Francisco and kind of be content to not try to push your chips in for the 3rd wild card spot and sell
and move a guy like Heli Ramos. So I like that move as well
And
if it were to happen.
For these teams that need outfield, because he has solid, at least, outfield defense. This is another guy I think could end up on the Braves later this season.
Braves do need an outfielder.
And then you look at this mess of NL Central teams all trying to make the playoffs right now. Pirates could use a guy in the corner of the outfield, or honestly anywhere. Their defense has been so bad in the outfield this year. The Reds could use a corner outfielder. Just a lot of these NL teams that are kind of right in the middle of the hunt. The Nationals could use a guy out there, another guy out there. So I think that's a guy that's definitely going to get moved just because of how many teams need outfield that are in the race this year. But we'll have to see what happens with that trade deadline getting closer and closer every day. And next week, we're going to talk about a couple pitchers who we think might be on the move. And now, last thing in the MLB, we're going to talk about our All-Star ballots for this season. And shout out to, I can't do that. They don't sponsor us. I was going to say shout out to a certain company that builds underwater nautical vessels for sponsoring things, but they don't sponsor us, so I can't say that. You'll know who I'm talking about, though. I think it's hilarious that they've been sponsoring so many things this year. But let's start off with first base, as these ballots do. And for me, it's going to be Tristan Casas in the American League. OPS at 857, average is down in the 240s, but when the OPS is that high, it doesn't really matter, and it's a lot of non-home run extra base hits, because he has 6 home runs, but the hitting is still there, and this is a guy who has been a little bit injured this season, but I still think the numbers are good enough to warrant an All-Star nod, so that's who I have for me. Who are you sending from the American League?
I'm going with a pretty chalky pick from the American League. I went Ryan Mountcastle, excuse me. I looked at the list and was not very impressed by anybody, so I was most impressed with Ryan Mountcastle's numbers. I did give Casas a look, but not enough at bats for me to warrant an All-Star game vote. So I went with Ryan Mountcastle. And then over in the National League, I went chalk as well. Bryce Harper.
It has to be Bryce Harper in the National League for first base right now. The dude has been just insane all year, and he seems to get hotter and hotter every week, which is absolutely outrageous. But we're going to snake a little bit over into the stay in the National League over to second base, and the snake was intentional phrasing there, as I've gone with Ketel Marte of the Arizona Diamondbacks. He has been tearing it up this season. OPS in the 830s, average in the 270s, 15 bombs. It's like I'm hitting with him on MLB The Show right now.
I was going to mention, if you didn't, Micah is very good with Ketel Marte's card on MLB The Show. I also have Ketel Marte here in the National League. Then I went Jose Altuve in the American League.
Me too. Moving on. Staying in the American League for third base. This is another pick we have the same. I know, very, very... Way for us to switch it up. It is Royce Lewis, the oft-injured
I did mention him first when we were going through this.
You did mention him first, so credit to you for picking him first. But no matter how much a guy has been injured, you can't argue with a 1261 OPS, 348 average, and 10 bombs. It's insane.
2 outcome guy, home run or hurt.
Yes. Yes, definitely.
That's all I'm going to say on Royce Lewis. He's had very limited at-bats this season, but he still somehow has double-digit home runs.
Yeah,
and hitting 350. So
yeah, it's honestly, it's not just power. The guy hits for average, too, which is not something you get from a lot of players, obviously. Now, National League third base, I have gone with the homer vote here, and I've gone with Jeimer Candelario. The numbers aren't overly impressive at a 247 average, a 783 OPS, and 14 home runs is a good number, but you look at this guy since the start of May, the middle of May. April and start of May, Jeimer Candelario was horrific. It drug the numbers so far down that's going to take forever for them to really come back up. But him recently, he's just been on another level. It seems like he has a multi-home run game at least once a week right now, just ripping the cover off the baseball. There have been multiple games where he's the only guy on the Reds that gets a hit, and he's doing all of this while battling tendonitis in his knee. So it's been incredibly impressive from him over the last month and a half, and I think he deserves an All-Star nod.
I went with Colorado Rockies third baseman Ryan McMahon. I almost put 2 Colorado Rockies in my All-Star game ballot for the National League, which is crazy to say out loud. I almost gave the nod at shortstop to Ezekiel Tovar.
He's been really good.
I think he's a really nice piece for the Rockies to build around.
National League shortstop is so hard right now.
Definitely. And Ryan McMahon's just been kind of a bright spot in a very dark organization, or a dark time for the organization.
No, it's just a dark organization.
He's batting 280 with an 840 OPS, also has 2.5 WAR so far this season, so I gave Ryan McMahon the nod.
Yeah, and imagine if you told someone when Chris Bryant signed with the Rockies that there would be a all-star third baseman for the Rockies and it would not be Chris Bryant already. He has done literally nothing for them.
Yeah.
He's been hurt so much. It's been ridiculous. But as I mentioned earlier, National League shortstop has been a hotly contested debate, and I'm going to contradict myself a bit here because last week I said that I would take the production of C.J. Abrams over Elly De La Cruz. Well, I voted for Elly De La Cruz because the numbers now have gotten so close. 251 average versus 275, 812 OPS versus 827, 14 home runs for Elly versus 12 for Abrams, and then Elly's stolen base numbers are just so astronomically high. I think that part of his game, plus I know there's the thing where, well, he makes so many errors. 95% of them in the past month have been in one inning versus the Brewers. This is a guy who's getting close to 5 outs above average at shortstop this season. The defense is very, very impressive, and he's feeling more and more like a complete player every week. He's really hot at the plate right now, hit an absolute moonshot versus the Pirates on Monday that hit off the top of the boat in center field.
Somehow it was only
Great
444
American.
feet.
I refuse to believe. It was 439.
Oh,
It said
man.
439. I refuse to believe
There's
it's
no way.
439. It was an absolute bomb. What was the one we saw Corbin Carroll hit there last year? Was that not 450 plus and it went to like the same spot?
I think it was.
Yeah, so I don't know how they're doing the math this year, but all that to say, I have gone Elly De La Cruz at shortstop.
And I went C.J. Abrams for all the reasons Micah told you last week and then did not follow through with them this week. But I can't fault you there. The number's super close. Gotta give an extra vote to your guy.
Yeah,
I'm not mad about that at all.
Listen, I do a couple ballots a day for the All-Star game when I'm not doing anything, and invariably, out of the two I do, one will have Elly, one will have C.J. Abrams. I think they both deserve to be there. It's a shame that they can't both start. I think they both deserve to, honestly. Then in the American League, this shortstop pool is so different to where it's not super deep, but there's two guys. There's two main guys that you have to pick between, and just Gunnar Henderson has 25 bombs.
Yeah, and nearly 1,000 OPS.
Yeah.
Gotta give him the nod.
Especially Bobby Witt cooling off a little bit recently. It's really pushed the needle towards Henderson, in my opinion. Then over to catcher, it's another Baltimore Oriole in Adley Rutschman, hitting 301, OPS at 828, 14 home runs, and right up there with one of the best defensive catchers in baseball.
And it's once again Rutschman 1, Perez 2 for me. I went Rutschman as well. His numbers are too high to ignore and to omit from my ballot.
These poor Royals getting gypped by the Orioles' young stars.
Well, this is payback for when I think 2015. It was either 2014 or 15 when the Royals had legitimately 7 starters in the All-Star game.
It was like the Royals and Mike Trout was the starting fielders.
Alcides Escobar was the starting shortstop.
Somehow.
Like, what are we doing?
I don't know. It was insane times. But over in the National League at catcher, for me, it's got to be William Contreras. He's hitting 297, OPS at 807. Not quite to the 10 home run mark yet at only 9, but this has been just the centerpiece of the Brewers lineup this year, and a lineup that's been pretty good all season.
Yeah, and a player I miss dearly from the Braves. He has that walk-up song, Narco, same one as Edwin Diaz,
Yes.
so always had a good time with that. Wild Bill, as they like to call him, has had a really good season. He's getting his average up. He always sat around 260, 270 with the Braves. He's elevated that a lot this season. Has a high RBI count, which is expected. I would have expected him to have more home runs than 9 up to this point, but he's done enough offensively, and then he's good enough defensively to where I thought this was pretty much a no-brainer.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Then staying in the National League again, for the outfielders over here on this side, it's Heliot Ramos for me, alongside Jerks and Profar, who has also been amazing, average at 317, OPS just under 900, 10 homers, and then my winner of the week, Brian Reynolds, who has been just raking this season.
Yeah, and I went Teoscar Hernandez as my first outfielder. He has 18 home runs, 54 RBI, and 813 OPS with the Dodgers. I also went Brian Reynolds, and then I went Christian Yelich, who's batting 315 with an 877 OPS. A little bit lower RBI count, but I think probably has to do with William Contreras stealing a lot of his RBIs from just comparing those two RBI counts. So my outfield is Hernandez, Reynolds, and Yelich.
Yeah, I would say if I were going to switch anybody, the debate for me is between Profar and Yelich. I feel like they're both very close, but I ended up going with Profar for this. Then over in the American League, it's really the two Yankees and then whoever else you want to throw in there. And for me, that was Stephen Kwan. Aaron Judge and Juan Soto are all but guaranteed starting spots in the All-Star game this season. They have both just been otherworldly, both with OPSs over 1,000. Judge is even over 1,100. Judge with 28 home runs, Soto with 19. Soto hitting 306, Judge 299. They've both just been out of this world. And then Stephen Kwan keeps flirting with 400. He even reached it at one point. Now the scrub's all the way back down to 386. Just cut him immediately. Then OPS over 1,000 at 1010. 7 homers, which for a guy who is not renowned as a power bat is not a bad number for him
and
at
especially
all.
the fact that he's missed some time this season. Doesn't qualify for any of the leaderboards because he doesn't have enough at-bats.
Yeah.
It still has 7 home runs, and he usually
raking.
doesn't hit more than about 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And we have dead balls this year. So that's crazy.
The dead balls are for everybody except Stephen Kwan this season.
Apparently. I'm sorry to be boring, but that is also my outfield. I think that's pretty much a consensus there. You see 3 OPSs in the thousands. You kind of got to click on them, in my opinion.
And it's crazy to me that Stephen Kwan has a higher OPS than Juan Soto right now. That's mind-boggling.
That's wild.
Then finally, DH, first in the American League. I've gone a bit weird here, and I've gone with Kerry Carpenter of the Detroit Tigers. He's hitting 283, 8 home runs, 29 RBIs, and a 914 OPS. Those are not the, in a vacuum, most impressive stats of any guy in this pool for sure. However, I raise you, plays in the most hitter or most pitcher-friendly park in baseball, in Comerica Park, and then also has no lineup protection whatsoever in Detroit. So I think you put both of those guys together, especially because I would say Riley Green is some protection. I think, unfortunately, Stephen Kwan has kind of stolen Riley Green's All-Star spot for me recently, but outside of Riley Green, what else does Kerry Carpenter have with him up there in Detroit? Javi Baez swinging wildly in the dirt on every 2-strike pitch. So I've been really impressed with him this season. I think he deserves an All-Star nod. And
I went with a more chalky pick. I went Yordan Alvarez. Batting 290 this season, 16 home runs, 41 RBI, 878 OPS. A little bit down when you compare it to some of his first halves in the past few seasons.
This is a little down is insane. Yeah. These are still great numbers.
Yeah, so I went ahead and gave Alvarez the nod here.
Then over to the National League, it is showtime. It is Shohei Ohtani. It's very close between him and Marcell Ozuna. Ozuna will never be voted in. He could hit 550 and not get voted in just because of the off-the-field stuff with him. But Ohtani with a 320 average, 24 bombs, and an OPS over 1,000 for me is the National League DH. I almost said American League because I'm so used to him with the Angels.
Yeah, I really wanted to vote for my guy, Marcell Ozuna. He's had an incredible season. If you would have told a Braves fan last season in April that next season Marcell Ozuna would be your best hitter, they would have looked at you like you were an alien. But he's had a really good season, been the Braves' best hitter pretty much from the beginning of the season up until this point. So he's had a great season. Unfortunately, Shohei Ohtani exists. Well, not unfortunately, but
unfortunately, I wish he didn't exist.
Unfortunately for Marcell Ozuna's All-Star starter hopes, Shohei Ohtani has been just a little bit better across the board this season. 24 home runs, 59 RBIs, like you said, 1,034 OPS. He's just been incredible, and he might become the first DH to win NL MVP. I think it's going to be between him and Harper down the stretch.
I think if Harper keeps hitting like this with his defense at first base, he gets it.
Yeah, we'll see.
But the thing, and also you need to be careful joking about Ohtani not existing. Ben Verlander will hunt you down.
True, he will.
You need to be careful, but that is it for baseball this week, and let's move over into some college football talk. And let's start with we're going to go through our Heisman Sleepers right now, and these are guys that are outside the top 10 in odds via FanDuel, and you might be shocked that some of these guys are outside the top 10 in odds. I know I was, at least, but I will let Samuel start.
All right, I'm going to start with the guy with a little bit less buzz than probably our favorite guy. I'm going to start off with Avery Johnson, who showed incredible flashes in that bowl game. I think it was the Pop-Tart Bowl against NC State. I know it was against NC State. I think it was the Pop-Tart Bowl, the rebrand of the Cheez-It Bowl, RIP to the Cheez-It King or whatever his name was.
Elite rebrand, though. They did great with the edible mascot.
The edible mascot was really cool. Avery Johnson is not just a guy that has really cool hair. He is also a really good quarterback, a dual threat type.
The hair does help, though.
The hair definitely does help. He has a really nice hair.
+5 throw accuracy.
Yes.
I need to see that in EA College Football, by the way. I need hair that gives me more accuracy. Avery Johnson hair equipped, plus 5 throw power.
And his emergence late last season, I think, is part of what prompted Will Howard's decision to transfer out and go to Ohio State.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Not saying he's necessarily better as we speak than Will Howard, but the fact that Will Howard decided to leave, I think, is a little telling in this spot. I think the Big 12 being as wide open as it is one of the reasons that Avery Johnson and my other guy that we'll get into later, that's kind of the reason that those two guys came to the front of my mind when I opened the odds and scrolled past the top 10 guys.
I just realized 3 of our guys are Big 12 guys.
Yeah, which is crazy. I think Avery Johnson has a lot of potential this season to put up really big numbers for Kansas State, and I think that being in the Big 12 is only going to help that. I don't have much belief in the defenses in the Big 12.
No, and there's really no reason to. My first sleeper is a guy that anyone who knows me will know I was super high on all of last year, and that is Missouri quarterback Brady Cook. The guy just deals constantly. He's an amazing passer, as good as at improvising as well. This is a Missouri team we both have said we think will go undefeated this season based on their softball of a schedule, and you can't convince me that a very, very good quarterback on an undefeated SEC team doesn't win the Heisman.
Right.
Like, there's no way that doesn't happen. If Missouri runs the table, Brady Cook wins the Heisman.
I think you're right.
The fact that he's outside the top 10 in odds is ridiculous to me. I think people are somehow sleeping on Missouri again, even though they returned a lot of that talent on that team. They really
Luther Burden's back.
Yeah, they really just lost their 2 main corners in Ennis Rakestraw and Chris Abrams-Drain, and then their kind of tweener edge in Darius Robinson. But the rest of that team is pretty much back, and Cody Schrader. But the fact, too, that he's going to have Luther Burden again and an even better version of Luther Burden, Brady Cook's going to go insane.
In a Big 12 without Texas and Oklahoma.
Well, they play in the SEC.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. That was a brain fart moment.
You're wishing back for, like,
the early
2000s.
I'm thinking of my other guy. Sorry.
That's okay.
I zoned out.
I'll let you talk about your other guy, because this is a guy, too, that I want to heavily endorse. I told Samuel when he sent me this guy, I said, there's no way he's outside the top 10. He's who I would pick straight up. And who is that guy?
Well, let me set the scene for you here. This guy is plus 4,000 to win the Heisman. His coach left after a pretty successful last season in which he pretty much exploded in the bowl game. Let's just read his stats in the bowl game. 24 completions on 38 attempts, 354 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, which was kind of the low light there, but they did defeat Oklahoma. It was Arizona, and my sleeper is Noah Fifita. Took over in week 4 of the season last year for Arizona as the starting quarterback, and in those 13 minus 4, 9 games. In those 9 games as the full-time starter, he accumulated 2,869 passing yards and had a really impressive touchdown to interception ratio of 25-6. So Noah Fifita is, if you were to make me pick 3 guys to win the Heisman regardless of odds, I think he would be second.
Really?
Regardless of, like, he's plus 4,000. I think that's incredible value.
Who would your number 1 be?
Quinn Ewers.
Okay, fair enough.
I think I'm forgetting his top receiver's name. Is it McMillan?
Tedderoy McMillan.
Yeah. He's back as well. They did not follow Jed Fish to Washington, which is really cool. Another guy in the Big 12. Sorry for my brain fart earlier. That's who I was thinking of. I think.
Yeah. Fifita, the film on Fifita is already so good, though, especially if you go back and watch the Oregon State game and the Utah game from last year. Those are 2 very, very good defenses that I want to say put up over 250 on both of them. I think it was close to 250 versus Utah. But
275 against Oregon State and 253 against Utah.
So over 250 versus 2 probably, top 20 defenses in the country last year. So Fifita is amazing. I don't think he'll be too affected by the loss of a coach. I think talent like that kind of works on its own, especially in a league that we've already talked about a lot, weak defense over in the Big 12. Mm-hmm. And then our final guy here, it's our only non-quarterback, and it is Oklahoma State's Ollie Gordon. He's just he's a bowling ball that can also juke you out. He is an amazing running back. Samuel can test this, I always kind of have a sweet spot for like the country's best running back to win the Heisman every year. It was Blake Corum a couple years ago before he blew out his knee. This year it is Ollie Gordon. I think he's going to go crazy versus a Big 12 league that, even though they aren't good against the pass, they're even worse against the run for the most part. I think Ollie Gordon's going to put up video game numbers this season, and if these SEC teams all kind of cannibalize each other, if Oklahoma State runs the table in the Big 12 and they are led by Ollie Gordon, I think Ollie Gordon would deserve that. The one thing that I think could get in his way is if a team like Oregon or Ohio State runs the table in the Big 10, if maybe you see a Will Howard or a Dylan Gabriel kind of get in his way that way. But I think Ollie Gordon is definitely is in with a chance at least to win the Heisman.
Yeah, for sure. And moving past our Heisman sleepers, if you've been on social media this week and you are interested in the EA College Football 25 game that is set to come out in less than a month now, which is really fun to say, then you know that they released a list of the top 10, and later they released the top 25 toughest environments, or toughest, I forget how they worded it.
Toughest places to play.
Toughest places to play in college football. So they released a top 10, and we also made top 10s for ourselves.
Yeah, so
let's compare and contrast those.
Yeah, let's start with EA's top 10. I'll just read them out right quick. It is Kyle Field at number 1, home of the Texas A&M Aggies. Bryant-Denny Stadium at 2, home of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Tiger Stadium, LSU at 3, Ohio State at 4, Georgia at 5, Penn State 6, Camp Randall, Wisconsin at 7, Oklahoma at 8 with an interesting stadium name, Florida State at number 9 and Doak Campbell, and then the Florida Gators at number 10. Now, let's start at 10 and count our way down on our list. So who do you have in your number 10 spot?
Okay, so if we're counting down from 10, the first two names you're going to hear, if you're just a college football fan, you might be like, man, why are those not in the top 5? They win at home a lot. Well, these first two fan bases and environments, I'll say, that I'm going to mention that are going to fall at number 10 and number 9 for me, fall into the category that I like to call we expect to be here. Yeah. And the first one that falls into that category for me is Alabama. Alabama's football games, they have a nice environment because it's like a business meeting. You show up, you get your business done. You are happy when it gets done, and you're not so happy when it doesn't get done. But the reason Alabama has been such a tough place to play, and probably the reason it's elevated a little more on the other list, I think, is just because of how good the team has been.
Yeah. It's not that the crowd.
I think you have to consider that a little bit when you are talking about toughest places to play. I think Alabama is kind of one of those places where it's just like golf clap when we score a touchdown.
Well, you look at the Texas game last year. That's why all offseason I was like, Texas is winning in Alabama. It's not this overwhelming home environment. It's that the team is so good. It makes everything around it seem better. And you saw Texas go in there and beat them, straight up beat them. So I definitely agree with that. And then what was your other team in this class here?
And then at number 9, I have Georgia. I think Georgia's fallen into this category as well. I don't think in the Mark Richt era, I don't think Sanford Stadium was really that hard of a place to play. They had letdowns year after year in the SEC. The one at the forefront of my mind is Tennessee's Hail Mary at Georgia to win the game. If it's a raucous atmosphere, I'm sorry, that just does not happen. A Hail Mary is not going to win the game in a raucous environment. And it did, I believe that was 2016 at Sanford Stadium. Obviously, it's gotten a lot tougher to play at Sanford Stadium since the hire of Kirby Smart. They've been on this incredible run. But I think it's kind of one of those fan bases and one of those environments where everyone just expects to win. And so they kind of check out by the second quarter. And so it's one of those things where, it might be pretty tough the first drive, but I don't think you can only consider the first drive. I think you got to consider the noise level of the fans throughout the games. I think you got to consider how the fans are in night games versus in day games, and if there's a huge drop-off there, which I think there is for Georgia, both Georgia and Alabama. And just my last thought on Georgia, like, the only reason I put them above Alabama is because they have fans that will just bark at you.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit intimidating if you're an opposing fan visiting Sanford Stadium. It's probably intimidating as a player to get barked at by the by the fans down by the sideline. So 10 and 9 for me are Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah, I could definitely I'm not too far off on that Alabama thing. We'll see how I feel about the other in a minute. But I have Texas at number 10. I think Texas is such a difficult place to play. And I know there will be people saying, well, Texas lost at home a lot. They were terrible. They were bad for so long. Well, look at I know this is a big aspect of a home environment is elevating a team. But if you watch a Tom Herman coach Texas team, he had no idea what he was doing. And I think if you have a coach that cannot adjust within game, no matter what your crowd is, another team is going to exploit you for that. So as soon as Texas got even remotely good again, you saw not a lot of people started winning in DKR. They really took it to Alabama a couple years ago. Should have won that game, in my opinion, and then looked better and better every year. I think DKR is a very tough place to play, but there were a couple teams I was teetering on for that 10th spot. Then everyone up here is people I thought guaranteed dead on should be on this list. Number 9 is the Oregon Ducks, and Autzen Stadium is rowdy out there. It is a very tough place to play. There's a reason not many teams win in Autzen other than the Washington Huskies. And then you look at a big game for me last year was I know Colorado last year was not a good team, but still the beatdown they put on Colorado.
Never had a chance.
No, and the crowd was into that entire game. This is not a crowd that they went up by 40 and the crowd started to leave. They started to go home. No, they were still at Colorado's throats the entirety of that game. And you see that for every team. This crowd in Autzen is the best West Coast crowd by far. I'm sorry, Washington fans. It is.
Yeah, it's not even close. Oregon comes in at number 8 for me. I pretty much would echo everything you just said there. They're also 19-1 in their last 20 home games with that loss, that home loss to Washington. I believe that was this past season, was it not? It was. And really tough place to play. Dan Lanning has that place trending in the right direction, and it just came back to my mind. That's an interesting thing to note when you have Ohio State coming into town.
Ohio State's losing that game
this season. So
Oregon is winning that game.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. I think Oregon's going to take that one. I believe. Yeah. Anyway, Oregon number 8 for me. Do you want me to go down to number 7?
Yeah, sure.
Number 7 for me is Penn State. A lot of people might have them a little bit higher. I kind of have them in this middle spot. I think they're an extremely overrated home atmosphere, but I don't think it's quite enough to drop them out of this list entirely.
Man, who would drop them out of this list entirely?
The reason I don't drop them out of the list entirely is because despite their struggles against Michigan, against Ohio State at home, they just can't seem to win.
Everyone ranked ever.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that. Penn State takes care of business against everyone at home, pretty much everyone at home other than Ohio State and Michigan. And the only reason I don't take them out of the list for that is a lot of these games against Ohio State and Michigan at home that they've played that have been somewhat close, I think have only been close because of how awesome the atmosphere is. And so that's why I have them remaining in the list at 7.
All right. My number 8 is Jordan-Hare Stadium and the Auburn Tigers. And this is a real weird one because on the one hand, you lose to New Mexico State at home. And some people would say you cannot ever be on this list if you lose to New Mexico State at home as an SEC football team. On the other hand, you ask any SEC team, what is one place you do not want to go at night ever? I would rather stay home and not play the game. Jordan-Hare Stadium. It is one. I think if you ask someone where they want to go on a night game SEC, what are 3 places you never want to see on the schedule? They are LSU, Florida, and Auburn. I think those are the scariest places to travel late in the season or for a big game or for a night game. You do not want any part of Jordan-Hare voodoo. There's a reason that's a thing. It's Alabama every time Alabama comes to town.
That's my only pushback.
There's Georgia every time Georgia comes to town.
I think it's just those 2, though.
See, but it can't not be on the list though if it elevates a team that much.
Yeah,
you look at
I'm not mad at that.
An Auburn team who I think if last year's Auburn team travels to Georgia, they lose by 30. If they travel to Alabama, they lose by 30. Instead, they were 1 play away from beating Alabama, and if they remembered how to cover Brock Bowers, they beat Georgia as well, and that was just like 2 drives. So when you have a team that has, in my opinion, had no right to make a bowl game even last season just based on the talent level, and they are so close to beating 2 of the top 5 teams in the country, and you see that every time they come to town, I think it deserves a spot on the list, so I have them at 8. Then
I'm not too mad at that.
Okay. Then at number 7, I have the Clemson Tigers, and this is a difficult one for me because they are so unbeatable at home, and I think if the list was who is least likely to lose a home game, Clemson is higher than this. The issue for me, though, is just for a lot of that stretch they were so good, teams like Florida State fell off a cliff, and so there's not as many difficult teams coming to town as there are for teams I have above this.
That cannot be your argument.
This is if you
cannot be serious.
I know you're not going to like that, but
2015 Notre Dame comes into town as
Notre Dame,
the number 3 ranked team.
Notre Dame and Louisville are the two big.
Number 3, 2016 Louisville comes into town with the Heisman winner in Lamar Jackson. They come into town, they lose to the Clemson Tigers. Both of those games, Clemson was not favored to win the game, and they were the lower ranked team.
That's why you're
2018.
That's why you're this high on the list.
2018, number 10 Texas A&M comes in because of the atmosphere, never has a chance.
That team wasn't that good.
They scored 10 points. They didn't go anywhere else and only score 10 points. Later on that season, Clemson has. Okay, it's not just that. Okay, well, I'll save my Clemson thoughts for later.
That's the reason.
Clemson's a lot higher on my list.
I think that it is a tough place to play. It's an incredible environment, but for me, you look at the teams above them on this list, I can't say that it's more difficult to win a game at Clemson for just any team than those other places, in my opinion.
No chance.
Okay, well, we'll see. Let's do from here. Let's just go 1 and 1. So who's your number 6?
Oh, go. I think we should go from number 1 down to number 6.
All right, so let's go back up to 1. And for me, the number 1 is Baton Rouge. It is Death Valley. It is LSU. That is just, it's the most difficult place to play in college football. I think most people would tell you that. They've registered multiple earthquakes down there in Death Valley. It's the most terrifying place to play every year. I want no part of LSU and Death Valley ever, especially at night. It gets even more terrifying. You never want to see that on your schedule. I think it is the toughest place to play in college football.
And that's a consensus pick there from me as well. I have LSU in my top spot. A little bit of a history lesson. Clemson's Memorial Stadium was nicknamed Death Valley first. Obviously have the rock from Death Valley, Howard's Rock. Cool tradition there. The reason LSU calls their stadium Death Valley is because they came into town against Clemson and beat Clemson, I believe, in the 50s, maybe the 60s. Either way, it was a Frank Howard Clemson team. Beat them. They were already pretty much known for having a raucous environment. At first, they called themselves Deaf Valley, DEAF. That is harder to say than Death Valley. I think they got a little bit lazy, and I think they should have kept their Death Valley name and not just ripped off Clemson's Death Valley. I know I can't really talk about ripoffs because Clemson as a university is kind of just a ripoff of Auburn, but added a lake and took the mascot as well. But definitely
without the cool part of the mascot.
LSU is definitely the toughest place to play.
Yeah, we agree on that. And then at number 2, I have Michigan. It's another place that you just don't want to see on the schedule. And you saw as soon as Michigan got even remotely nationally relevant, no one won in Michigan.
No. And you have 110,000 people right on top of you
massive.
In that bowl shape. It's not even the upper deck and the lower deck system. They're all just right on top of you.
And I tell you what, if you've never seen it, go watch a video of the crowd singing Mr. Brightside at Michigan and tell me that is not a top 2 environment in college football.
That no doubt. Michigan's also my number 2.
Yeah, then number 3, this is where we start to disagree, and I have Georgia at number 3, which I think might surprise you a little bit, but I would say 4 seasons ago, you asked me how much difference the Georgia home crowd makes. I have them about where you do at 9, but in recent years, when Arkansas was good and came in there and got nothing going whatsoever, when Tennessee came in as the number 1 ranked team in college football and did almost nothing versus that Georgia team
that won the national championship.
Still, though, it makes a difference because that was a very good Tennessee team, and there's a difference between 2 teams.
I just don't understand how you can
caliber
how
teams.
Can you elevate Georgia for that, but you push down Clemson. You say the only reason is because the teams were so good throughout that period.
Because I just feel like this Georgia crowd doesn't get as many, like, they haven't played a night game in like 4 years, so I feel like it's hard to judge them on the quality of, because they're not. And the one time they did, I know it was not an amazing Notre Dame team, but they curb stomped that team. And the Ole Miss this past year, it was a good Ole Miss team, murdered them when Missouri came to town.
Also won the national championship last year.
I know, but these teams are so. They're not even leaving a doubt in these games other than the Missouri game. And I think Missouri was a top 6 team in football last year. You just look.
Maybe that's teams, where we differ a little bit. So when I'm thinking of tough places to play, I'm thinking like close game, who's going to push you over the top? And I think Georgia fans in these close games, they get anxious and they are not loud. And I think they get anxious, and I agree with you. It is a very hard place to play when Georgia is spanking the other team. But I think when you get Georgia into a close game, which we have not seen them in a close game at
Missouri
home since, other than Missouri, and I don't think the crowd was as much of a factor.
You watched the miscues of that Missouri offense in the fourth quarter.
Georgia had the best defense in the country.
Missouri had a top 5 offense in the country.
Like, the crowd's good. It's not number 3 good. It's just not. It's not. It's not better than Clemson's. Clemson's my number 3 team. Clemson, there have been several games throughout the last decade that Clemson was dead in the water and should have lost. But what did the crowd do? The crowd stayed with it. The crowd was the 12th man. We'll rip that off. We're the school of rip-offs. We'll rip off Texas A&M's 12th man for all I care. Clemson's Death Valley Memorial Stadium is a top 3 tough place to play in the country. You think of 2016, NC State had a 27-yard field goal to win the game. He missed it because you've got the hill, you've got all the students losing their minds, and he pushes it to the right. Clemson wins that game because of the crowd. You fast forward 2018. Trevor Lawrence, a freshman, gets knocked out of the game with a concussion. Kelly Bryant had just quit on the team. He said, "I'm not the starter anymore. I'm just going to quit. I'm going to redshirt this year. I'm not going to be there for my team." Literally the next week, our freshman quarterback goes down. Chase Bryce inherits a 21-7 deficit against Syracuse. The crowd gets behind Clemson, force a couple turnovers, a few false starts. Chase Bryce legacy drive to win the game. The crowd at Clemson pushes them over the top. We go back to 2015. We already mentioned that Notre Dame game. I was at that game. The best environment in college football I've ever been to. Granted, I've only been to Clemson and South Carolina for non-neutral site games. I will say that. But Notre Dame was the better team in that game. Notre Dame had this big come from behind to kind of try to steal the game at the end. 2-point conversion. That place is incredibly loud. There's a hurricane going on. It's raining so hard my poncho was soaked through. And what do you know? Clemson gets it done with a 2-point conversion stop. Once again, fast forward back to 2016. Lamar Jackson pushing down the field to win the game. They had Clemson pretty much dead in the water, and the crowd lost its mind so much on that 4th and 11 play that the Louisville wide receiver literally forgot how far he was supposed to get the first down, and he was run out of bounds 1 yard short. And those are only the ones that come to the forefront of my mind. And so that's why Clemson's number 3 for me, because it's not always just these absolute blowouts and the crowd just gets on them at the beginning. It's these games where it comes down to 1, 2, 3, 4 plays, and that Clemson crowd just pushes them over the top. And you'll hear Dabo Swinney in his pressers. If you look up any of these games' post-game pressers, the first thing, thank you so much to the fans. We would not have won this game without the Clemson Tiger faithful in this game.
Yeah, I think that's where you and I differ, because I think if you look at my 5 to 8 range on my list, those are the teams in that category that you're talking about, where if it's a close game, the fans will kind of lift you over the top. Whereas my top 4, I feel like are places, because to me, it's more than just can the crowd lift you up in a close game. It's these crowds, I feel like my 1 through 4, LSU, Michigan, Georgia, and then the next game I'm going to get to. If you're a team that is similarly skilled as them and you go in there and you go down early, you have no hope ever. The crowd will decimate you instantly.
I could say the same thing about Clemson.
I feel like
my thing about Clemson is Clemson has that piece, and they have the piece where they'll push you over the top in the big game. Because there's other than this year, Florida State, which we lose in overtime, and that wasn't on the crowd at all. Cade Klubnik just got strip sacked. We should not have been in that game. That was the only time that a team came from behind at Clemson in the last decade.
Yeah, I just think we're going to agree to disagree.
And the 3 losses since the last game came out: by 1 point to Pitt in 2016, by 1 point to South Carolina in 2022, and by 7 in overtime, with a missed 29-yard kick to win the game for Clemson.
Okay, how different from that is Alabama's home record? I
already talked about why Alabama's so low.
Okay,
their crowd just claps like they're at church.
The home record,
after a song is sung.
It can't only be the home record though.
But the margins of loss, 9 total points, 3 losses by a total of 9 points. Some of these other teams, LSU, they're the toughest place to play. They've gotten blown out of the water at home a couple times. Michigan, before the Jim Harbaugh era, blown out of the water a few times. Florida, blown out of the water more times than can be counted. Ohio State has lost to Michigan twice in a row at home. Tennessee, we know they have 19 losses in the last decade at home.
It's when I look at these other teams, it's more where do I feel like I could just send a random team and they would have a chance of winning the game? Like if it's just.
So are we? I don't know. We're just gonna have to agree to disagree.
I think we're viewing this differently, and
we're just gonna have to agree to disagree. This is good discourse.
Yes. And anyway, at number 4, I have Ohio State. I think that the Ohio State crowd it's one of the best in college football. Easily, the shoe is raucous out there. It's a very hard place to play unless you're Oregon. But the years that they owned Michigan, you think of the JT Barrett year when he was maybe kind of short of that first down. That's a game that I know this is what you mentioned earlier. That's a game that Ohio State does not win without that crowd there. These big games, Ohio State's crowd, as I mentioned, they can just deliver that knockout blow. You're an away team, you have one bad drive, the crowd will not let you hear the end of it for the rest of the game. So I think they are just on another level. And then this was a surprise to me is who you have at 4 and who I have at 5. I did not think you would rank this team higher than me.
Yeah, I'll just round out my 4, 5, and 6. I have Florida. The Swamp is just absolutely unbelievable, especially at night. I think this is one of those where there's not, I wouldn't say there's a giant gap per se between night game and day game, but I think if I'm making a night game only list, I'm putting Florida at 2, only behind LSU.
Yeah, I would do that as well.
I think the Swamp is that good at night. I think Florida's the only reason Florida doesn't crack the top 3 for me.
Because the team was bad and they lost a lot.
How the team is the fact that the team has been bad. But they're still good enough. The crowd is still good enough for me. Like I would not want to go into Florida and play a good Florida team. Like I'd want to go there right now because they're down a little bit, but I don't think that's the crowd's fault at all. I think Florida's going to find themselves.
You look at the Utah game a couple years ago. They had no business even being close to Utah that year with how bad that team was. Week 1, night game, crowd into it, dead Utah.
Florida's going to find themselves this season in a game against a team that they should not beat.
I tell you what, they intentionally gave us no night games at the end of the year, and that is why. Our brutal stretch, our 5-game stretch at the end of the year, the Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State, LSU and Ole Miss, both of them, neither one of them are night games. I know the LSU says TBD on time. It is not a night game. They did not give us night games on either one of those teams because they don't want to see a Florida team ruin an Ole Miss or an LSU season late in the year because of that. But I tell you what, all you UCF fans that are saying UCF is better than Florida right now, you got a night game in Gainesville. You are going to be decimated.
Yes.
UCF has no chance.
Yes.
Anyway, I have Florida at 5.
Yeah, Florida at 4 for me, Ohio State at 5 for pretty much all the reasons that Mike already mentioned.
And we both have Tennessee at 6.
Tennessee at 6. I think that's pretty much a sweet spot for Tennessee.
Yeah, their home crowd is so good. And they're another team kind of like Florida where just the team has not been good, but the home crowd will carry them anyway. And I tell you what, their Halloween night game might be one of my favorite entrances I've ever seen.
With the black uniforms,
black
too.
jersey, like spooky Rocky top.
Yeah.
That was a very, very good entrance. But I think we can both agree that our lists are miles better than the trash that EA cooked up with Kyle Field and Texas A&M at number 1 somehow.
So that might have been a little hard to keep track of. So if you just want to hear my 1 through 10,
it'll be on the screen.
Okay, it'll be on the screen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
1 through 10 for both of us will be on the screen, and the graphics department will make sure that the teams are kept up with throughout that segment there for you guys.
Sweet.
Then I had a couple honorable mentions. I had Alabama out of my list entirely for the reasons you said. It's a lot of golf clapping down there. Washington just missed. They were probably my number 11. They're a very good environment, not quite into that tier that those top 9 are for me. Then Penn State. Oh my goodness, is Penn State overrated? They don't have any meaningful home wins since the game where they blocked the kick versus Ohio State. And if you're a team, I don't care, because we talked about all these teams. We just had such a long discussion about the crowd should be able to take the team over the top in these games. The crowd should be able to take the team over the top. Take the team over the top one time versus Ohio State or Michigan since, 2017?
Yeah.
So it's outside of the top 10 for me. Fight me, I don't care. Then I had UCF just outside. The bounce house is insane. I think with UCF in the Big 12, the world is going to learn a lot more just how insane the bounce house can get. It's a great stadium down there at Central Florida. And then just not even an honorable mention, but in here because they were in the EA list is Florida State. You lost to Jacksonville State at home. No.
Yeah, what are we doing?
No, not a top 10 hardest place to play, but anyways, after all that rambling, that is the college football talk for this week. Then let's get into the NHL and the Cup Final, which has been won by the Florida Panthers. They did not blow the 3-0 lead. They had a good last game, brought it home, and a lot of people saying Connor McDavid both didn't turn up to Game 7, didn't deserve the Conn Smythe. Do you want the guy to win the 7-game series for you by himself? Like, Leon Draisaitl did not show up past the second round of the playoffs. Flat out did not show up. Zach Hyman wasn't there to do his little tip-in drill in front of the goal every game. You can't expect just your goalie to shut out a team like Florida all the time.
And McDavid did have 11 points throughout the series.
He broke the record for most consecutive assists in back-to-back games, if that makes any sense. Had four assists or 4 points in back-to-back games. Record. And this team, there's no defensive core at all. The 6 starting defensemen for Edmonton are so bad. The lines backing up McDavid and Draisaitl and Hyman are not great. This is a team that is as good as it is because of Connor McDavid. Make no mistake about it. The defense is not there. The goaltending for a lot of the time hasn't been there. I know Stuart Skinner had his moments, but you can't bash McDavid for not showing up in Game 7 when the rest of his team didn't show up most of the series.
And another thing, you got to understand that the Conn Smythe takes under consideration the totality of the playoff run.
Exactly.
And
it's kind of a weird hybrid.
And point blank is the Oilers don't even sniff this far without Connor McDavid.
No, not even close. So I think he absolutely deserved the Conn Smythe. I think if Sergei Bobrovsky if the Panthers wrap this up in 4 and Bobrovsky has another excellent performance in Game 4, they sweep the Oilers, then give it to Bob. But McDavid is just on another planet. I completely agree with him getting the Conn Smythe. And then congratulations to the Florida Panthers. What a great team. Shout out to Evan Rodriguez for being the first player named Evan to ever win the Stanley Cup. Kind of a fun fact. Then Alexander Barkov, first Finnish-born captain to lift the Stanley Cup for his team. Another fun fact there. And the first Stanley Cup for the Florida Panthers since they have been a hockey team. So how about hockey in Florida, too? The Tampa Bay Lightning basically ran the league for a few years, then they fell off, and the Panthers are like, it's our turn now. So hockey in Florida is doing surprisingly amazing right now. Credit to the Panthers. Great series for them, too. Then, speaking of great series, let's talk about Omaha and the Men's College World Series. Tennessee wrapped it up in 3. Dang it. But not just because my pick was wrong, because I do not like Tennessee, but oh well, I guess you had to watch Billy Amick lift the trophy for another team, which could not have been fun for you.
Only had one hit in the final series, so
does have the best walk-up song in college baseball, though.
Also,
walk-up song is elite.
Took that away from Clemson. We do that
I know, but it's very
every
good.
7th inning stretch.
It's very good.
That's where he got that one. It is a very good walk-up song. I'm not. You can't. I cannot be punished for not liking Billy Amick just because of how he left. Like, you
underestimate Twitter. You can be punished.
I respect Billy Amick. He won the move. He improved his draft stock. He played third base. He won a national title. He got what he wanted, but he left like a thief in the night from Clemson. He ghosted his teammates. He left because Coach Bakich told him that we had a third baseman and we had a better third baseman defensively in Blake Wright. Billy Amick's numbers a little down this season from last year when he had an incredible second half of the season. But the fact that he was able to play third base, which he wanted, is what's going to make him end up being drafted late first, early second round of the MLB draft. So hats off to Billy Amick. He won the trade. I'm not forced to like him for the fact that he was successful.
Which, if that doesn't tell you about the state of college athletics now, we're saying guys won the trade.
Yeah.
That's sad. But speaking of winning things, let's talk about Texas A&M, who they may not have won the College World Series. They also lost their coach.
Before we get to that, I kind of talked about last week when I was picking this series, just the inevitability of the Tennessee Volunteers. And in that first game, obviously Texas A&M coming away with it, but I still didn't leave that game thinking Texas A&M is going to win the College World Series. It just was still at the forefront of my mind that Tennessee's inevitability is going to show up at some point, and it did in that second game. Down 1-0 for a few innings. Dylan Dreiling has an incredible series, back-to-back games with 2-run home runs in clutch situations. In Game 3, it was kind of to break the game open to score Billy Amick and himself in that 7th inning.
I thought A&M was going to come back. I wanted them
They
to
come back a little bit in the 8th and 9th.
Not a little bit, almost all the way. 1-run game.
Yeah. Well, I'll get to that in a second. 8th inning, you chip away, get a couple runs with the bottom of the order. That was very encouraging because then in the top of the 9th inning, you have the top of the order, and Graham Grahovac scores on I forget his first name, but the catcher Appel.
I think it's Jaden Appel.
Jaden Appel. Okay, he singles, scores Grahovac, and you've got one out, or no, you've got no outs and one on base. And Jace Laviolette has a pretty good at bat, gets it to 3-1, and then takes a high strike to make it 3-2. And it was very borderline. It was at the top of the strike zone. Makes it 3-2.
NCAA baseball refs? Really?
Then he swings at ball 4 up in his eyeballs. Probably a little bit to do with the fact that strike 2 was a little bit high, but
yeah.
So it got his vision up a little bit there. He couldn't quite lay off, but that was a massive swing in the game. You think about having 2 on and nobody out with a tying run at the plate. I think tying run at the plate, or was it winning run? Winning run at the plate versus 1 out, 1 on, and the tying run at the plate. Yeah. So the second run scores in that inning. So you got 1 out, guy on first. You strike out the next guy. Defensive indifference gets him to second base. A balk gets him to third base. And then a wild pitch in which the catcher could not have been paid to walk fast to the ball. He gingerly paced.
It reminded me of the Oregon State
over
play
to the
when they lost to
baseball
Kentucky.
And allowed that. That was the most meaningless run in history to score. So that's why I still say they almost came back, because that run really at the end of the day means nothing other than if you laid the 1.5, if you had Tennessee minus 1.5 to win the game, then that run pissed you off. Or if you had the
catcher was paid by Vegas.
Or if you had the under in the game, because the over under was 10.5.
Catcher was definitely paid by Vegas.
What do you know? That was the 11th run. And I know a lot of people had minus 1.5 and the under. So that run, while it meant nothing in terms of the game, you still got to focus on the batter. The batter is all that matters.
Yeah.
The batter was the tying run.
First ever defensive indifference from a catcher.
For a lot of people, that run meant a lot more. So Tennessee, the best team wire to wire throughout the college baseball season. They won the SEC regular season. They won the SEC tournament, and they win in Omaha. They break the number 1 seed curse. First time since 1999, the number 1 overall seed has won the Men's College World Series.
Made me very sad.
Christian Moore was the best player. I guess Dylan Dreiling was a little bit better in the Men's College World Series, but in the postseason, Christian Moore was pretty much the best player for Tennessee.
Also, not a Golden Spikes finalist.
Yeah, somehow. But that 1 through 4 maybe even the 1 through 5 was just incredible for Tennessee. And getting back to the coach thing, you got to wonder, was this move of Jim Schlossnagle that was announced today, Tuesday, that he will be the next head coach for Texas, was this already in his mind when he was coaching these games this weekend? I think it had to have been.
Well, it was reported at the start of the weekend that Texas's AD had gone to Omaha and said he was not coming back until he hired Schlossnagle to come to Texas. And if it's announced Monday, like you're saying, obviously Schlossnagle had to know on Sunday, or even before that maybe. And if you have a guy who is at A&M, and I know one away from a College World Series win, but what I assume was a blank check from Texas is going to be in the back of his mind, obviously, during that game. And how about Texas managing to still make it about themselves more than Texas A&M right as they move to the SEC, to where he's going to be coming back into the conference to see them every year? It's impeccable timing from Texas. I find this whole move hilarious, honestly, but A&M has to be just even more upset than they already were, and that it's Texas of all teams doing it.
Back to Schlossnagle, what an absolute disgrace that he is, not only to that fan base, but he had the audacity to pretty much berate a reporter for asking him the question. He was like, the
reporter asked him what was his commitment to A&M, right?
Yeah, and asked him about his potential future as the head coach of Texas A&M. And I'll actually just pull up exactly what Schlossnagle said, because he was insulted that he had even been asked the question, and was talking about how much he had given up to become the head coach. He was the head coach at TCU before Texas A&M. So the question from the reporter was, with respect to the difficult outcome tonight, but with the rumors circulating today about a specific job opening, what do you have to say about your future in Aggieland? Which, completely fair question.
Yeah.
That is one of, if not the most coveted jobs in college baseball. We know Texas's history in baseball. Their recently fired head coach was the only head coach in history that had not won a College World Series title while in his stint as head coach at Texas. And Jim Schlossnagle has the audacity to respond this way. I think it's pretty selfish of you to ask me that question, to be honest with you. Pause there.
No.
Selfish? We'll see who really is selfish. The rest of the answer. But I left my family to be the coach at Texas A&M. I took the job at Texas A&M to never take another job again, and that hasn't changed in my mind. Really, did it? Disclaimer, it changes within the next 24 hours, magically. That's unfair to talk about something like that. That's like you asking Montgomery if he's going to sign in the draft. But I understand you've got to ask the question. But I gave up a big part of my life to come take this job, and I poured every ounce of my soul in this job, and I gave... interesting that he's using past tense verbs. Maybe we should have seen this coming.
Yeah.
I gave this job every ounce I could possibly give it. Write that. So he's going to be snarky at the end with the reporter.
But this says write that too. Knowing, you have to imagine he already knows this move has happened.
Oh yeah,
especially using past tense, like you mentioned. Saying write that to the reporter. Why would you say that? First of all that's all that's going to do is reflect poorly on yourself. I don't know.
Absolute. I don't even know.
I don't know. But
garbage.
Then finally, last little bit here, staying with coaching, real quick. The NBA, the Lakers have hired JJ Reddick.
Got to shout out our fellow podcaster.
Yeah, fellow podcaster, JJ Reddick, now the coach of the Lakers. Maybe us someday.
Yeah, maybe I'll get to coach, the Brooklyn Nets the next time that job comes up. Maybe even the New York Knicks if they're looking for podcasters.
Yeah, hooray.
We'll see.
Listen, the way the Suns are going, they'd hire me.
Yeah, back to JJ Reddick for just a second. He was asked in the introductory press conference what kind of conversations he had with LeBron leading up to the hire, and he decided to answer back saying that he and LeBron had not discussed the job at all until after he was hired. That is just an outright lie. If you are the team that has LeBron James under contract, number one, you're absolutely consulting him on who he wants as head coach. And number two, the fact that LeBron is testing free agency waters this season, allegedly,
he's not anymore.
That would be the first person you would call and consult. There's just no way that LeBron's fingerprints are not all over this hire. JJ Reddick's only coaching experience in his career post post playing in his, I believe, 15 or 16 year career as a professional basketball player. His only coaching experience is of his third and fourth grade. His son's team in the third and fourth grade team on the circuit.
Well, you got to start somewhere. And to all the third and fourth grade basketball coaches out there, maybe you next.
Maybe you could be the coach of the either most or second most storied franchise in NBA history.
I think it's the most.
I don't know. 18 banners for the Celtics. I gotta give them
Are you going storied or like well known?
Storied.
Okay, it's Celtics.
Yeah.
Well known's the Lakers.
Well known's definitely the Lakers. Yeah. Oh, and how about some rumors circulating about maybe JJ Reddick's past at a certain university? Go look that up if you would like to.
Yeah, go look up JJ Reddick comment at Duke or whatever. It'll be on Twitter. But all I have to say for that is, why now? But anyway, that is it for this week on what has been a pretty long episode for you guys. So hope you enjoyed that. We will be back next week with more to talk about as we get closer to the MLB All-Star break. We'll talk about some teams who may need the All-Star break versus who might not want it yet. We'll have more winners and losers, some pitchers we think might get moved to the deadline. If anything else comes out about EA College Football 25, we'll mention that as well. But for this week, that is it, and we will see you guys next week.